I'm having so much fun looking through this Atari50 bonus content about all the history. It's amazing stuff. This is actually part 3. It's your first time popping in. Make sure you go watch the other 2 videos. There are probably going to be 2 other ones on top of this because there's more to cover, which is in crazy and stuff. Anyways, if you are new, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up button. We're going for 500 thumbs up. You guys have been outstanding the first few videos. I greatly appreciate that. You guys seem to be enjoying this. Once again, let me know in the comments if you guys are enjoying this, what the most fascinating thing about these videos are for you. I mean, comments are huge, and I will be down there in them as well. Today, we're talking about the highs and lows of being at Atari. Obviously, lots of highs, and obviously lots of lows. We're going to get to a lot more lows here coming up as we move along. But did you know, I had no idea until I saw this. There was an official Atari Handshake. What? Yes, look at how weird this thing is. The official Atari Handshake. You put your hand out, and then you put your other hand on top of the other hand, and it's like a little joystick. That's awesome. I mean, really, that's awesome. Just absolutely silly. These are the wonderful things that you learn with compilation discs like this. All right, so we're going to start with this Sword Quest Earthworld. By far, Atari's most ambitious project for the VCS was Sword Quest. Was to be a 4-game series, each game hiding a complex puzzle that would lead to a single player winning a $25,000 prize crafted from gold and gemstones. The first game released was Sword Quest Earthworld, programmed by Dan Hitchens. Okay, this is just crazy to think about. The idea, could you imagine releasing something like this today where you say, we're going to release a game, and by the way, only one person is going to win $50,000. I feel like something like that happened actually in the last few years, and I think it kind of blew up in their face. I don't know, maybe my memory is just serving incorrectly, but just a fascinating thing. So let's actually learn more about this from the origins of Sword Quest. Once again, you guys can buy this entire package So Adventure was... Why can I not hear you? Really oh, it's because I have you turned down. There we go.
And we were
Hold on.
kind of... There was some vibe around maybe a sequel to Adventure. And somewhere in there, I got the idea of doing a series of games that were contests with comic books with real prizes made by Franklin Mint.
What an outstanding idea. How innovative is that idea? The idea of creating almost a universe of content that all ties in together, which is what you see now. Once again, trend setting, changing an industry. I did want to point out, you guys can actually buy this Atari50 game. There's a link down in the description and a link in the comments down below. Once again, I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm just having so much fun. It's an Amazon link. If you do buy it, I'll receive $1 or $2 from the referral. But hey, you go ahead and check it out for yourself. This is a treasure trove of video game knowledge. Let's continue on.
We were part of Warner Communications, and somewhere along there, we had started to be doing bits of comic books with the games. And
it's kind of interesting, just the idea that it's kind of stuttering. I'm showing you this on Steam, by the way. This is all on my computer. I wonder if these videos are having issues on the actual file or whatever. I don't know why it'd be having issues, but
because Warner Communications on DC Comics. Warner Communications, I happen to know, I don't know that anyone else was paying attention, also owned Franklin Mint, right? Franklin Mint being a collectible company. I don't know, they made plates and little figurines and stuff, if I know, medallions, and not my scene, but it's a creative world. It's hard to talk about this without going me, me, me. I don't love going me, 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 but a lot of it was, I consider myself to basically have been the showrunner of Sword Quest. The concept was mine, the literary concept, the material. So the games are actually moderately literate and erudite, right? The whole story.
I would like to let you know that I don't even know what erudite means, but I'll just gotta go with it and pretend like I do. He talks about he doesn't want things to be me, 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 but at this time in video game development, it wasn't like today where there's literally hundreds of people working on video games. A lot of times, this was one person developing out an entire concept, doing entire ports of games, or coming up with entire new franchises on the web. They didn't call them franchises; they were just games. and then maybe you got a sequel later on down the line. But I mean, I think he says it's hard to talk about me, but that's the reality of a lot of times. It was just me with these games, and I think that is fascinating.
It is put together as a lot like a Grail quest or something in Joseph Campbell. It would be a hero's journey, a spiritual evolution, a life. It's a story of a life, of a energetic, a magical life, right, through these mystical systems. So I embedded it in a lot of historical culture of mysticism, and sold the idea, and it went over big.
I could absolutely see why that would go over big. I mean, this is such an amazing forefront idea where you're just thinking about what video games could be and thinking so much larger than video games. Did you see that gold chalice? I mean, surely somebody has that, right? Surely somebody has that today, and it's sitting in someone's office, or maybe it's sitting in a landfill. Who knows?
You know, it was certainly...
Which, by the way, we will get to the landfill in this episode. This is where the crash happens.
It was brave, it was ambitious, it was audacious, and it had a certain je ne sais quoi, but I don't know what it is. You know, I'll back up a little bit. There was kind of a bizarre effort to do a combination of Twitch and adventure game, to merge and to create an action adventure. I think Howard tried this in Raiders, right, where he tried to make an adventure game that was built into an action game and merge the two. So I consider Howard and I to be some of the pioneers of action adventure.
Rightfully so. Oftentimes you see a lot of developers and creators at this time that are just so overlooked. I mean, I guarantee if you saw this gentleman walking down the street, you would have no idea who he is, what he did, or you know, the impact that he's had on your favorite hobby.
Got to say this in a certain way. So you'd play this action game and maybe get a clue, a prize that you'd add to your inventory. And if you had that in your inventory, then you could unlock, then you'd be on this map. You wouldn't necessarily see the map, but you'd be inside a maze, and a door would open in the maze, and there'd be another action game there. And so it was kind of like a first-person adventure with action elements. That was basically, and you know, I got looking back at it when I say it that way and knowing those are the times, it was very audacious. And it was actually very creative. It was really, you know, it was really cool.
Wow. How many of y'all have actually heard or played Sword Quest before? Nope, not me. I've never played Sword Quest before, but man, I've heard of this idea. The idea that you have all sorts of, you know, you could win this. You can win fabulous prizes by solving the mysteries of 4 new cartridges. Wow, how cool is that? I mean, really, think about how cool that is. I mean, there's got to be a series on YouTube talking about this specifically, because this is just absolutely cool when you think about this. 8 finalists try for $25,000. Man, I may just post this itself as its own thing on the community tab. So make sure you guys, once again, have everything turned on, ready to go, because if you don't, you're going to miss something in this. Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. The Atari 5200. Now this is where, when I say the good stuff, you're going to see the video, the tragedy. Atari 5200, an Atari quote-unquote tragedy. In the words of former Atari engineer Jerry Jessup, the 5200 was a good idea gone horribly wrong. In this video featured Jessup, Howard Scott Warshaw, and Scott Fry explain how the 5200 was released into the market over the objections of Atari's engineers. Okay, this is where things start to go a little wrong. You guys remember the video game crash in '83? Very famous. The landfill, the whole thing. We will actually get into that in just a minute. We're going to talk about the crash as well as what happens after the crash. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm having so much fun learning about this. I know I say that every video, but as somebody who really enjoys video game history, this is like a must-have. This is for $40. Like, that's how much this cost on Steam for me to get. This is a bargain for the amount of wealth and knowledge that I've learned from just going through and hearing these firsthand accounts of what's happened. It's amazing. I can't wait to hear what this is. The Atari 5200.
The 5200 was a tragedy.
Like, what a statement to start. It was a tragedy. Man, I don't know what's going on with these videos, but odd.
The 5200 was a good idea gone horribly wrong.
The big problem that we had at Atari, the thing that killed the industry more than any other one thing, even more possibly than the E.T. video game, is that it was the first product life cycle. No one had ever been through a major success video game console life cycle.
What an interesting take that is. The idea that, look, we were the first to do it, and after this product had seen its life run, we tried to come out with a second one, and no one had ever seen anything like this before, so they didn't know how to react. I mean, wow, what a crazy thought process, and something that you don't really think about. What a crazy different time. Where were we in the 8th, 9th, 10th life cycle of video games at this point? Just crazy to think about.
So where does it end? Nowadays, when somebody comes out with a new system, they already are designing the next system because they know the life of a system. They know a console is good for a certain number of years, and then it's going to die, it's going to fall off, and that's when we need to be ready and prepared to come in with a new system. Holy crap, you know, our first machine is finally falling off the cliff. We need something. We have something. We can take the 800, 400, 800 computer, repackage it as the 5200, spit it out, and we can do it.
Ooh, that's where I get a little worried. Anytime somebody says we're going to repackage something, I mean, it's worked. You know, you think of like Super Mario Brothers 2 and Doki Doki Panic. It's worked on occasion, but the idea of repackaging something and saying this is new, more often than not leads to some sort of failure. I mean, there have been successes, certainly, but that always scares the dickens out of me, and it would scare the dickens out of me.
So the 5200 was basically what the 400, 800 was going to be 3 years before. It's a tough business. Business is cruel. And, you know, like I say, I'll say it again, it was the first time anything was being done. No one knew.
And what happened was the Atari 5200, it grew very large because marketing wanted perceived value, so bigger was better in some.
Look at how sleek that looks compared to the first Atari. The 2600. And by the way, you go from 2600 to 5200. Naturally, you go, well, it's twice as good. It's twice as good. And this looks more like more like something that you would put in your house. You know, it doesn't look as video gamey. You know, it's kind of sleek, kind of stylish. You pop it right on the top. It's simple. It has 4 controller ports.
Respects. And then marketing got really focused on the Intellivision. And Intellivisions had a bunch of buttons. They had a keypad. And they had this disc with 12 distinct regions. And so, hey, if we put an analog stick here, and one that doesn't self-center was the great idea, this will be a better marketing message than the Intellivision controller. And of course, it was a horrible experience. The company lost focus on what was important, and it was gameplay's important.
What, man? Oh my gosh. So lots packed in there. The idea of gameplay being extremely important. That's the number one thing. You're selling a video game console, right? So your gameplay's got to be awesome. But if you remember on the Intellivision, what he talked about was the controller on the Intellivision. Well, you guys can't see. The controller on the Intellivision had a button pad that you would put things like almost like covers on top of it for each individual games. And then it also had a disc at the top, which you could use your thumb to do. That's actually the earliest console I remember playing. And I'll tell you, when you look at the 5200 controller compared to the Intellivision controller, it looks the same, but not nearly as cool, which, you know, I think what they're going for.
Good games sell, bad games don't. If you've got a bad control mechanism, doesn't matter how good the graphics are.
Woo!
It's not going to be fun to play.
Now what do you do? So
Fire.
And that was the thing. Engineering we really wanted to do something cool, right? We wanted to do like a real next generation because the 400, 800 was already last generation.
The engineering team and the creative team, the game designers, we were so upset, and we all felt that we were making a wrong decision with this controller, that we put together a petition to upper management, and we just explained that, you know, this is a great product, the control is lacking, we've got some other alternatives we want you to see, and my name's number 3 on the list of the petitioners.
See, I wasn't someone who...
Man, that's crazy. You think about what a simple idea that is. As I'm sitting here playing these videos on this controller, this has become like this dog bone controller, which kind of started with the Super Nintendo. You know, this looks very similar to a Super Nintendo controller when you put them side by side, and you know, really they all kind of look the same now, right? How, you know, you don't mess with what's not broken, and it's really kind of fascinating to see. But once again, they were still learning. What they had known at this point was a joystick that you'd play with at an arcade and a couple buttons. So that's what they were trying to replicate. But it's crazy to think that no matter how good the games you play, the games are, if the controller sucks, and none of it matters. And it's a 100% true statement.
Sign petitions so much as talk to people behind the scenes, because I always felt that was more like the way you operate in a corporation. And but I definitely put the word out whenever I could that, like, you know, this is something we either should have done a few years ago, or, you know, can't really do now.
We told marketing, hey, we could make this 2600 compatible. They didn't want anything to do with that. They said they must be very separate and distinct. We can't have backwards compatibility, which at the time we thought might be a great feature. It's a good way to get people that have these Atari games already and keep them on the Atari platform instead of giving them an opportunity to jump to another platform. And so we designed the product specifically so that you could never have 2600 compatibility. About 2 months before launch, they demanded 2600 compatibility.
Oh my God.
Time, we had to build an adapter. And then we actually had to modify consoles that were already made, the first ones, to work with this adapter. And we called this thing the piggyback parasite. We were just horribly embarrassed by that situation. That never should have happened.
There was some...
Oof, that's rough to hear. That's so rough to hear. And I can totally relate to that. The idea that you're taking orders from people who think they have no idea what they're talking about, but they think they have all the answers. And you as a developer, you as an idea person is telling them, this is the way it needs to be. This is the way it's going to happen. And then they're like, oh, no. And then right before something's, oh, by the way, that idea you had is genius, and we should have listened to you the first time. How infuriating would that have been to be in that situation? I know from experience, it is incredibly infuriating.
Big time denial, you know, around Atari, because nobody wants their parade rained on. And when it's the best parade you've ever imagined in your life, nobody wants to see a cloud. You just don't want to see it. So we didn't.
So we just, you know, turned around. What a monstrosity that is. Oh my gosh, how crazy. That is so weird to see. All right, so the 5200 leads to this. This is probably the most intriguing part of this for me. The landmark in the sand, the idea that here is where the video game industry dies in 1983. We had a good 11-year run from 72 with the release of Pong all the way up to 1983. It's been a decade of success, but it all comes crashing down. In 1983, the incredible momentum of the video game market in America came to a screeching halt. Sales plummeted, game makers lost millions of dollars, and many went out of business entirely. In this video feature, Atari designers and players discuss the conditions that led to the crash. What's crazy is you know, there was the rumor for a long time about, you know, it was the urban myth, the myth, the legend about the Atari landfill, and now we obviously know that it happened, and it's going to be interesting. I don't think, have we ever heard who ordered it to happen. It was just executives ordered. And like, why would you just get rid of all that stuff? Crazy to think about. All right, let's check this out.
When you have a tragedy, and I do believe that the fall of the video game industry in the early 80s was a tragedy. It was a tragedy to many, many people. It changed a lot of lives.
That's fair.
I think it's pretty obvious when it comes to the video game crash that Atari didn't have control over the quality.
I mean, it needed some sort of way to keep just anybody from writing cartridges for it.
That's the one thing that you continuously hear is, just the amount of crap that was thrown out. People didn't know what was good, what was bad. This seems to be the common narrative that quality was the main issue for the crash.
So many people saw this video game gold rush and they just, started dumping crap. I remember going into KB toy stores and just seeing, really bad box art and just really just terrible looking games. And that's when I started losing interest and the market became flooded just with garbage. And it ultimately led to, of course, things like E.T. being, actually buried in the desert like garbage.
And what happened was that E.T. became the face of the crash of the video game industry. And I, of course, was the butt behind the face.
Which he was the developer of the E.T. game. And if you hear people, I actually saw a video recently that was talking about E.T. and about how if you know what you're doing in the game, it's actually a pretty good game. But the thing is, nobody has any idea what they're doing in the game. Hence the running gag of it just being like one of the worst games ever. I've never actually played it, so I have no idea.
That's kind of the way it went.
Greed and hubris, that's what undid Atari. If they just had worked more from a place of like focusing on making great games and delivering great games to the customer instead of like how can we maximize revenue, I feel like they'd still be a huge powerhouse today.
Frankly, Warner did not understand technology. They didn't understand the consumer marketplace, the video game, and Ray Kassar, I think was afraid of releasing new product because it might not be as successful as VCS.
If you go back to the previous video where we were talking about the handheld, it was the Cosmos, I believe it was called. That was a Cosmos, was the handheld Atari in 1981 that pre-sold 100,000 units that was never released. I mean, yeah, you can see why the president went to 1983 because that's when everything came to a screeching halt and something's got to change.
So that's a sure way to fail.
I regret that we didn't have a new console by '84 that would have made it so that Atari continued to be a really viable business.
We never, ever got down to ever having any process by which we could come up with a better system.
Even today, I think people do believe that, like, if they just released like the 5200 earlier, or if they released the 7800, or they had done different things, they would could never have they would have survived the crash a lot better, and they would be like a powerhouse today.
What do you think? Do you think Atari would still be around as a quote unquote powerhouse today had they done that? I don't know. I have a really mixed feelings about that. I mean, it's 40 years. 39 years since this happened, 38, whatever it was, almost four decades since this happened. Lasting that long in any industry is insane. I mean, once again, Atari is still around. It's still releasing things like this, but I certainly wouldn't consider it a powerhouse. I would consider it a viable business. So more or less a small business now in the grand scheme of things compared to the rest of the video game industry. But still, it is being successful through its catalog of previous games and nostalgia.
Like as a kid, I didn't know much about business, but I just felt like something was wrong.
No one knew anything. Certainly no one knew how to replace an existing console with a new one.
The real one-liner about why the game industry crashed and went away is that it was a first product life cycle and nobody knew what to do.
Going back to what we saw a little bit ago. It's the first time. Nobody had any idea. All right, so there's the crash. I really wish we would have seen a little bit more about, about this. Like, whoa, this is fascinating stuff. The idea of going in and excavating all this stuff. Oh, look at that. That is cool. I mean, talk about How insane is that? These things just buried out in the middle of the sand. Just crazy. Just crazy. Wow. Okay. So what happened after the crash? That is... Did you see? Look at this nonsense. Make your own left-handed joystick. Uh-oh. Hey, guess what? We're going to get you hooked up. I mean, that's pretty neat. So what happened after the crash? Well, here we are. We have the answer here with this video. This is going to be the last video of this time. I know I've said this a zillion times. This is so much fun for me. If you guys enjoy video game history, video game culture, this is a great place for you to be. I hope you hit the subscribe button and you join me regularly. I don't release videos every day, although I am this week. So make sure you guys come back tomorrow for the next part of this Atari rundown, because we are eventually making our way to the Jaguar, which I cannot wait to. I'm gonna be playing those games on stream. And there's a ton of reimagined classic Atari games. They've released new games on this compilation disc, which is crazy to think. So we're gonna look at those as well. But first, we're gonna take a look at this. Let's check this out. Atari after the crash. The VCS, or 2600 as it was known, turned 10 years old in 1987. Think about what's happening there. Nintendo's releasing like Mario 2 and Ninja Gaiden and Bubble Bobble and Mega Man. It's crazy. But a revitalized gaming market meant that there was still demand for 2600 games. Designer Gary Kitchen, co-founder of Absolute Entertainment, soon found himself once again returning to the platform. Interesting. After the crash.
There's this funny time period in the history of, if I wrote a book on the history of the video game industry, there's this funny time period.
Sounds hilarious.
We had left Activision and we went from this fabulous AAA office complex, beautiful. We had more space than we needed by a factor of 5, and we went to the most horrible office in Midland Park, New Jersey, in the basement of an optician's office.
Yeah.
Game industry, this was after the crash. Game industry was a disaster. And it was just, oh man, what an office. It was horrible. But we survived in it. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. So anyway, we're in this horrible office, and we're doing C64 stuff at that point. And
Commodore
I get
64.
a call from a buddy of mine. Actually, he was our part-time sales guy. And he always...
I love that. I get this call from a buddy. Actually, he was selling stuff for us because he was my buddy.
Visited Toys R Us, and he knew them really well. He called me and said, you know, you're going to laugh, but they want to know if anybody's doing 2600 games. Because at that point, there were none. Nobody was doing them.
But there were 26 million consoles in homes.
And people were going in Toys R Us saying, why don't you sell games for my Atari anymore? So I said, wow, that's interesting. How many would he buy if he had a 2600 game? He said, oh, you know, 20, 30,000 pieces probably. And I said, all right, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I think I can figure something out.
We did title match wrestling and super skateboarding first.
Think of the wrestling. This is the Hulk Hogan era. You know, wrestling was massive at the time with the cartoon era. And of course, skateboarding in the late 90s. This is a perfect pick for the late 80s.
2 titles. I mean, regular skateboarding, first 2 titles. And he loved them, and they sold like crazy.
Never even heard of them before.
And at that point in time, we were the only people in the world making games on the Atari 2600. My phone rings, and it's the Tramiels. So he did some 2600 games. You know, do a couple for us, because word got around. There's actually a need. And then Activision calls and says, do some 2600 games for us? And I said, well, why don't you guys just do them? He goes, well, you know, if I could be completely honest with you, we don't have anything. We don't have the specs. We don't have manuals.
They forgot how to do it.
The equipment. He said, we couldn't make a 2600 game if we wanted to. So could you make something for us? I tell people that, they're like, who the hell wanted 2600 games? You know what? No one told consumers that there had been a crash. No one went to their house and said, you don't like video games anymore. Because that's what Toys R Us and Walmart said. People don't like video games anymore. But the people at home are sitting going, God damn, I'm tired of combat. Isn't there something else I can play on this machine?
Wow, what an interesting thought process. Like the toy companies were like, oh, there's a video game crash. But everyone else is like, there's a video game crash? Like, wow, what a cool thought process that is. And these guys, I'm sure they cleaned up. You sell 20, 30,000 of anything, you're doing pretty good. And the fact that they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll make something. Wow, good for them. That is awesome. I never even heard of those games before. And 20 to 30,000 in the grand scheme of things is not a whole heck of a lot, when it comes to copies of video games. But for the time, that's amazing. The fact that you'll order 20 or 30,000 of them, that's amazing. Wow, cool.
So it was good. We had a great run there. We made a lot of money off those games.
Oh, how cool. Wow, that is what a great story. I feel so, man, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And we still have 2 more of these to go. We got more to learn from. Next, we're going to move on to the PC era. You can see it right here. Boom, the dawn of PCs coming up next. Then we're going to move on to the 1990s and beyond. My God, can you feel the excitement, Vinny? Good Lord. How crazy is this? If you guys are enjoying this, hit the subscribe button. Go watch more from this series. You can find it up there. I actually put it in a playlist for you, and you watch more videos on my channel. Thumbs up is great. Super Chat's even more appreciated, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next episode of The Dawn of PCs.